Chapter 42 to 43. The weather in Little Garden was, as usual, a pleasant and warm one. The sky was clear. There were no clouds or anything in sight. From time to time, loud booms were heard, caused by two giants. They were at each other's throats again, as they have been for the past few months. Pride observed the two giants. It's been 6 months already. How time flies, Pride thought to himself with a slight grin on his face. He watched the two giants making more and more progress in their hockey usage. They were currently using both types of hockey. The beginning was pretty bumpy, considering their development. For the first 2 months, they had no success. They could neither intuitively dodge blows nor defend themselves against Pride's attacks. It was a mystery to Pride how people generally learned hockey. He had more of a structure to it, in a fairly simple way. Once he reached a certain point, he would receive Shanks's memories of what he should do next. For example, when Pride had learned to coat his body with armament hockey, as soon as he made enough progress on that, he would receive the memories of how to do the next step. For example, how to wrap objects with his hockey. There was no need for him to do a lot of trial and error to figure out how to do it. Of course, one of the reasons why it was so easy for him was because the system had already given him Shanks's physical constitution and talent at the time of his selection. After all, it is a well-known fact that everyone is capable of learning hockey. However, not everyone is as talented as Shanks is. As the months went by, the giants became more and more resistant to the process. Eventually, Pride noticed that their progress was stagnating, so he increased the difficulty and pain for them. While they were being trained in both types, he was now using the regular armament hockey and added a black substance to it that enveloped him and his branch. This proved to be successful. After another month of suffering, they could use the transparent armament hockey when needed. The same happened to their observations hockey a few weeks later. They were able to fend off a few blows at a time. Their sixth sense was beginning to blossom. Pride became curious. He asked how they learned to do it, but they couldn't really give him an answer. They said it was more of an instinctive thing. During the training, they always felt that there was some kind of danger coming from Pride. This was probably because Pride took the training seriously. He was training the giants as if it were a real hostile encounter. And at some point, there was a click in their minds. It was as if the water had just burst through the dam. Suddenly they were capable. They knew what to do, but they did not manage to use it smoothly. Sometimes they did not manage to activate it in time, and sometimes they did not manage to activate it at all. For the next 3 months, they mainly fought Pride or each other. They wanted to gain practical experience and be able to activate both types of hockey when and how they saw fit. After all, it wasn't meant to fail when needed. Pride couldn't help but smile as he remembered the past few months. It was certainly tiring to teach someone again, but the giants are going to be a great help to me. For the time being, they are still too weak. But as soon as they are able to wrap themselves in visible hockey and gain more strength, they will definitely be able to challenge me. But it might be a while before they do so. Of course, Pride himself did not sit idly by. Only after the giants had completed their training did his own training begin. Every night, he practiced his skills in mastering gravity. He improved on the ones he had already learned, and he learned new techniques as well. The first thing he did was start with his gravity slash. This was comparable to a regular flying slash. However, his gravity slash was much more dangerous because it had a crushing effect on the target. And Pride had a hunch that with the next level, he would also gain tremendous power in his discharge, or changes he can't even fathom. Afterward, he concentrated on amplifying his raw power in its entirety. Above all, he wanted to increase the range and pressure of his suppression, attraction, and repulsion. After he finished training with his devil fruit, he began to train in his swordsmanship. First, he did cuts from top to bottom. Then he started to cut sideways. First without, then with hockey wrapping. He felt that he didn't need much more to rise in stage. Even so, his main focus was not on his sword training. Pride felt he was wasting his time. If he only swung his sword, the progress and the guarantee of success were minimal. As much as he valued any progress, he knew that once the two giants were ready, his strength and everything would increase exponentially. Time continued to pass, and so another year went by. In the 18 months that passed, the two giants made tremendous progress. Their power had exploded in every sense of the word. If they were to have a meeting with their old selves, the process would be exactly the same as their meeting with Pride. It would literally be a walk in the park. They could completely erase their old selves without any resistance. After all this time, they were now able to control both types of hockey well. They could activate them at will. There were no more failures. They could now envelop themselves in a black substance and anticipate the trajectory of attacks. They had truly reached the peak of the beginner level. Their physical strength also increased during this time. They were now able to compete with Pride with their physical strength. Pride couldn't help but grin broadly. He narrowly dodged a hockey-coated fist from Dory. Not much longer, and the two together will be difficult even for me. The sky was once again shrouded in darkness. It was night. The The bright stars stood majestically in the atmosphere, bringing a little light into the darkness. Next to the yellowish light, a reddish light shimmered. The light from their fire was an addition to the sight. Its shadow was in a constant state of motion. Right, left. Around it were the two giants in pride. Haha, Broggy and I have truly lived in the shadows all these years. In the last 18 months or so, we have come to a level of strength that we never thought was possible. HHH. You're right about that, Dory. Then they both had a look at Pride. We know that you told us that you wanted to train us mainly so that we could help you with your training. But we're still very grateful to you, he added. A smile was all Pride could muster. You will be ready soon, though you have already been a help. When Pride looked back at the time that had passed, he had also been able to make a great deal of progress. Of course, the giants were not yet his equal hockey-wise, but they had already proven to be very useful in other ways. Since the two of them were physically on par with Pride, even without hockey, he trained for a long time without using it. He only used his gravitational power. Using this, he tried to influence the two giants. In the beginning, he did not succeed. He failed to influence them. But with each passing day, he himself noticed that his work was making progress, and that the giants gradually had to resist so as not to be attracted or pushed away. For the past year, Pride has been training really hard. For 2/4 of the day, he was mainly busy fighting against the two. In the process, he had a lot of changes in his attack strategy. Sometimes he used his devil fruit, sometimes his sword. Just thinking about that made him smile. Even if the giants could not coat their weapons yet, physically and in terms of weaponry, they were far advanced. After all, they had been using axes and swords for decades. Therefore, he made enormous progress in his swordsmanship. They did battle only with weapons, without hockey. The continuous fights with the two behemoths were the key to his ascension to the master stage. He was filled with excitement. All of a sudden, he felt that his swordsmanship could not be compared to the one he had before. For a normal swordsman, only striking flying slashes would make a difference. Not only has he reached the level of a master, with the help of the giants, he has also greatly improved the abilities of his devil fruit. He even regretted not using it sooner. There has been an increase in the range of his gravity suppression, attraction, and repulsion. What used to be 5 meters is now 15 meters. His gravity slash has been refined to the point where he can use it as a coating for his normal flying slash. This greatly increases its power. It has about the same effect as armament coating, but is weaker and has a lower energy cost. By sparring daily and training in the evenings, he learned 2 completely new techniques. Gravity coating is one of them. For now, Pride has only discovered its offensive uses. With it, he can completely envelop his fists in a purple bubble. This looks very similar to Whitebeard's attack. The only difference between the two attacks is that Whitebeard's effect is far-reaching. Pride needs to hit whoever he is trying to influence. Pride could swear that the discharge is almost as dangerous. This is because the part of the body that is hit is completely squashed and destroyed from the inside. In fact, it could be compared to the more advanced type of hockey, internal destruction. The only difference is that the impact is less. However, the idea that a devil fruit would be capable of such a thing is just plain crazy. The other technique he has worked on for a long time is gravity domain. Now, he has mastered it to a certain extent. This technique is also a very powerful one. Whether Fujitora was capable of it or not, Pride himself did not know. If so, he was much stronger than one might think. With gravity domain, he has control over everything within a 15-meter radius. That's how far his range currently reaches. In this area, he is able to control gravity at will. Should there be no gravitational force? Well, there you have it. Do you want to experience the same thing that Son Goku did? Here you go. But that's just the harmless part. The really monstrous thing about the gravity domain is that he has complete control over it with his haki. Within this radius, he is able to detect everything with his observation haki, down to the smallest particles. The dangerous part is that he can even control stones as small as a pebble. Have you ever been attacked by hundreds of stones that are coated with armament haki? That's the crazy thing about this technique. Pride found out that his domain was considered to be a part of his body. That is, it has the same effect on him as if he were to coat some body parts with armament haki. The energy loss is nothing like when he coats his sword or anything else. It is not an external coating. Come to think of it, this is a very powerful technique. It may not have much effect on the real monsters that roam the oceans, but it can serve as a distraction. And it can even be quite dangerous if the opponent is weaker or at the same level. Of course, it depends on Pride's hockey mastery. At the very least, it gets dicey when sizzling stones come at them at a crazy speed, possibly coated with internal destruction. Even if he can't control meteors from the stratosphere yet, it's a beginning. Pride. The two giants stared at each other. Pride. Whew. Yeah. Pride replied, awakening from his slumber.
Do we sight?
Dream less. Your food is getting cold.
Munch. Munch.
As he took one bite after another, Pride found himself involuntarily sinking back into thinking. Sigh. One might think that my progress isn't that great for my age, or Luffy did it at 19. Why can't you be as strong as him when you're almost 19? Shanks is a monster, why can't he be? This thought crossed my mind a lot. I think there are two explanations for this. One, I believe that Ruffy has the most talent in hockey in all of One Piece. I'm sure about that. The other reason has to do with the actions he takes. He is naive and foolish. He should have died plenty of times. Against Crocodile, against Doflamingo, and against Kaido as well. I mean, against Doflamingo, he couldn't use Gear 4 for 10 minutes. And Doflamingo doesn't think to find him and kill him as any rational person would. That's when you realize that Oda-sama had a hand in it. The second was that he always dared to go after stronger ones without thinking about it. That's how he was able to stimulate his potential, which is already the highest, over and over again. The result was an exponential increase in his power. It could also be that Shanks's talent is the same as Ruffy's, but he hasn't been exposed to as many life-threatening situations that caused him to blossom at a later age. I can't do this. My knowledge of the future is a hindrance. I may be a proud person, but I value my life. I wouldn't recklessly stand in the way of a Xebec or a Garp now. Sighs. Slow and steady progress for now. Then he got to his feet. Dori Broggy. I'm going to sleep now. We'll continue our training tomorrow.